So here we are with another episode of our candidate interviews here at the North Phoenix Chamber of Commerce. I'm Tom Arjo, the Executive Director, and I am blessed and grateful today to be able to spend some time here with Thomas Duggar. He is running for Legislative District 3 Senate position. Hello, Thomas, and welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure meeting you. So I'm going to jump right into the questions. I know your time is precious, and I'm gonna respect that. So the first thing I'd like to ask, I've been asking all the candidates the same set of 4 questions. The first I'd like to start out with, what differentiates you from your opponent, and especially from a business perspective?
Well, I've got over 35 years industry experience in the private sector. So obviously I'm a career private sector person. He is a career politician. And prior to that, he was also a public servant as a police officer. So he has never worked in the business sector at all. He is not doesn't know anything about finance. In our discussions, he doesn't know things like ROI and CBA. He doesn't understand what those concepts are. And all the bills he proposes, many of them are, there's a cost behind each one of these bills, and they are meaningless and frivolous. And over again, I see these bills that he signed on. I went through about 2.5 years of his stuff. There's no vendor bidding. There's no open bidding. These are one vendor contracts. A lot of waste. I see massive amounts of waste. I mean, I literally think that we could chop our spending by up to 50% and use that money towards things that would actually create and increase growth in Arizona. There is a lot of opportunity here to fight things like inflation, but we just don't have the people in place to make these decisions for us. We have a very reactive set of people. And in the finance world, you have to be proactive. If you're not proactive, you sink, and that's why so many government entities just are always, they have no idea what their budget is. They have no idea how much they've spent. They have no idea how much is coming. We had a $5 billion surplus this past year. $5 billion. That's out of $11 billion budget. That's a huge amount. And instead of investing that in economic growth for businesses, they did tax cuts and vouchers and things like that. It's like, okay, I'm not sure they understand, number one, how to fight inflation, because as we saw, like the governor of California just sent out checks. Well, that makes inflation worse. The whole problem with inflation is there's too much money.
Right.
And although I think it's great that they're giving letting people off, I guess, for loans, at the same time, this is the terrible time to do it. Again, that's putting billions of dollars back into the economy, which will increase inflation. And now
the loans are actually getting challenged right now, I think, and it doesn't take the loan away from the government. It defers it to you and me, which is interesting.
Yeah, we pay for those loans. If I have some family that really doesn't like when I mention things like this, but if you take a course in basket weaving and you use my money, my tax money, to fund your basket weaving, and then all of a sudden you can't pay because you've got a minimum wage job, we shouldn't be responsible for that. I don't think that we should give out loans to things that don't have any kind of realistic ability to pay back the loan.
Right.
Now, the loans have become very predatory, and you're not getting what you paid for. Like my school is now 5 times more than it used to be, and it's not keeping track with inflation. It's gone way up.
Right.
But this is because interest rates are so low. They're pushing and pushing and pushing how much people are going to pay per month. The same with the housing market.
Right.
So again, these are just things that, by having these low interest rates for so long, they've put us into the position where now we have to raise rates to control the spending, because there's too much cash out there, and people aren't cutting back. There's huge demand and not enough supply. Everything about inflation is supply and demand. And interest rates are a short-term fix. That's a terrible fix. If you think about it, now you've made it so that nobody can sell their houses. Like right now, nobody can sell their houses. Everybody's locked into their property. And if anything bad happens to them, they're going to lose. If they bought within the last year, they're going to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially,
Right.
or more, depending on how much the price was.
Right.
So everybody's looking at this backwards. Instead of like interest rates and giving people money, how do you really combat inflation? Well, at a personal level, you reduce your own spending.
Mhm.
I mean, you have to do that. Um, from a government perspective, what can we do? Well, we have to increase supply. If demand is high, we increase supply. And that's axiomatic. You must do that. That's the proper way to fight inflation. So, some ways, I mean, ironically, I kind of loop my whole campaign into one thing where if we increase the budget for schools, we're going to get a lot more companies moving here. Nobody wants to move to the company to the state that has 49th education.
Mhm.
And you look on Zillow, you see all these schools with really low ratings and things like that. And nobody wants to move here. So, like, we have a lot of call centers, we have a lot of data centers, we've got that. But the main core programming and stuff is all not leaving the areas they're in because they don't want to move here. They don't want to move those operations here. Now, if
So
we get, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so you're starting to touch on your legislative plans and that will
Yes.
impact business. And if you, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Is there any legislation that you think needs repealed, or is there anything that you think you're going to want to introduce going into the next session if you win
Well,
this seat?
absolutely.
So,
Well, first, this amendment that caps school spending has to go. This is hurting us financially. It's hurting the state tremendously. And in fact, we're one of the few red states that is wealthy that actually don't seem to care about education. It's crazy because we have the ability to just have enormous growth here, and we're just destroying it because of our lack of interest in education. And this 30-year thing that's been on there, it's like the gentrification of Arizona is completely different now. People have kids here,
mhm,
and we want the money here, and nobody wants to lose their money on their houses. So what do? If we are the education's better, these big corporations are going to say, you know what, Arizona, there's no tornadoes, there's no flooding, it's one of the best areas to actually be located because we don't have really any natural disasters.
right,
So this is by far the best area, and that's why people have their call centers and data centers here. Well,
right,
it'd be great if they could move their corporate headquarters here, but they don't want to because they don't want to go to the schools, right? They don't
mm,
want to go to if they're in California and California's, somewhere in the middle, or if they're in New Jersey, New York, way up at the top, um, they just don't want to move here. Why would they move here when all their employees would not come? Because they don't want to go to these schools that are ranked, 49th, 48th, 49th, 50th.
mm,
It's just not it's not practical. And so by doing this, they're hurting themselves because all this new money is not coming in. All these
right.
new businesses are not coming in. And all these people with money are not coming in to buy more houses and keep
And
the
this,
housing market.
yep, and
Yeah,
it's all is affecting economic growth in the
that's
area.
right. That's right.
So,
And there's nothing better than bringing in people from the coasts to Arizona because they're used to paying more for their houses than our inflated houses, which will prop up our housing market as we increase supply, right? We increase supply because we can build more houses, but no one's building, people are slowing down their building. And that's the best way for us to get new businesses here. We increase the housing supply, which we can do,
mm,
and then we have a realistic chance of actually having the best course of action against inflation of any state. I don't think any state has the potential that we do to curb inflation because
mm,
we have a surplus in the budget, a significant surplus. I mean, obviously, we have to deal with the water situation as well, but
right,
that's a whole different thing, and that has there's very little legislation around that. It's more regulation,
mm,
especially like groundwater being pulled out of the ground by Saudi Arabia, and I can't believe that's still going on. I mean,
mm,
that's a separate issue though. But so I mean, that will be another piece of legislation. We can't have all of our natural resources pilfered for $50 an acre. It's crazy. I
right.
don't know why there hasn't been an executive order to stop them from pulling all the water out of our aquifers. But you know, this is the country that attacked us in 9/11. I mean, the non-redacted version of 9/11 where it clearly points the money trail directly to a Saudi Arabian prince. This wasn't Iraq that attacked us; it was Saudi Arabia, and we went to the wrong country. And even worse, we didn't keep the oil, even though that we were told we were going to keep the oil, and then we didn't. So you see, we really have to protect our natural resources. Any foreign country or entity that is taking our natural resources, all that has to be stopped immediately. We have to regulate our groundwater at a state level. It has to be regulated so that our farmers don't lose all their land and their crops and everything else. We could convert a lot of their land to solar, and they could make a lot of money from that. But practicality wise, we don't have much time. It's going to take a while to implement this. They're doing this in Pinal County, and it's working really well. You know, I read they can make like up to 43,000 per acre, which is more than they're going to make on their crops. So would be a really good way to switch to solar, reduce our dependency on all these things, especially gas and oil. Now, people always come to me and say, well, as a legislator, what can you do for these gas prices? I go, well, I can't do anything. Oil's a commodity. It's traded on an index. They're like, what about price gouging? I go, well, it depends what you mean by price gouging. If the oil companies are doing something nationally, then it will be looked at that level. And then they're like, well, how come that place it's $1 more than mine? And I go, well, it's probably because their rent is more. You're talking about Scottsdale versus Cave Creek,
Right.
So that's all works into their rent. They're like, oh, so you can't do anything? I go, well, yeah, you could nationalize the oil business, but that's never going to happen. You have a lot of unhappy campers.
Right.
But as long as it's traded, we as Americans have absolutely no control on the cost of oil, despite the fact that we are a net oil exporter at this point. So it's kind of crazy, but OPEC still controls this. Yeah, and again, this is Saudi Arabia controlling prices to their benefit, and this needs to stop.
It's what we've allowed to have happen to us at some level too. So, okay, fantastic. I guess one final question is there, and I think you've touched on this pretty well. I think is there anything else that you want to cover that I haven't asked you yet about why business owners in this area in your District 3 should be supporting your candidacy? It sounds like you've pretty much explained that to us, but if I missed anything or give you an opportunity for anything else you want to fill in here.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if, it's funny because we're killing two birds with one stone. The education issue, which is an investment, and it's being looked at as a cost, right?
Right.
It's an investment. It's an investment. You invest in things. You invest in infrastructure. You invest in these things. And then what happens is that increases business. Small businesses, big businesses, medium businesses. Everybody benefits when you invest in your future. And that is proactive politics. Everything we've got right now is still reactive. And the Republicans in legislature, I'm kind of shocked at how little they care about how much is spent. Like, if you look at Alaska, they spend $17,000 per student, and we're spending $8,000 per student. And Mr. Kavanaugh, my opponent, said, no, we spend $13,000. And I'm like, in K through 8? What about if you take out the vouchers and you focus on K through 8? He's like, wait, well, no, it's 13,000. Like, well, okay, subtract the vouchers and just tell me what your K through 8 number is. And he just can't answer it because he has no idea. And he's like telling everybody, go look it up. I'm like, yeah, go ahead and look it up because you're going to see we're plastered at the bottom. And, I can't even say how important it is that we invest in our children, because we need skilled workers for these companies to come here as well. Right. We want people that are living here that are highly educated and are able to perform for these corporations coming in. This big deal with the chip manufacturers, they're going to have to source a lot of this stuff because we don't have the skill set in-house. Right now, we should be like, okay, let's get people ready for this job. But there's nothing proactive like that. I mean, no. I would be like, okay, let's get our own people. Let's get Americans in Arizona working on these jobs. Let's bring in the skilled workers to live here. I could just see if it gets outsourced to foreign countries, I would be pretty upset about that. Too much has been outsourced, and you can see the problem with it because we've outsourced so much. Right. We have massive supply chain issues.
We have dependency on China beyond anything we ever anticipated, right?
That's right. And luckily, China's is decreasing. A lot of our stuff is coming from a lot of the other Asian countries now.
Right.
It's pretty much spread out enough that China, it doesn't have the dominance over us that they did in, say, 2015. So that's gotten better. But you hear these people saying, well, let's put tariffs on the goods. I go, well, tariffs on the goods are useless if you don't produce the same good in America. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I go, well,
Right.
you put a tariff on it, it just means you're going to pay that money. The consumer's going to, they pass off the tariff, goes right to you. So when these trade wars happened in the last administration, I'm just like, he could have said, okay, we're going to subsidize some industrial sectors so that we can build up, all this, the infrastructure and the industrial base, so that we can move a lot of the stuff that's offshore onshore, because it's costing now so much to transport goods.
Right.
And we can actually build it here faster.
Yes.
Build it faster and better. Like pharmaceuticals. There was just an article about India's using all these substandard ingredients, and all these other ingredients are mixing in there. You don't know what you're going to get. And pharmaceutical, that should be built here. We are the America should be the kings of pharmaceuticals, not India. This is stuff that we should absolutely have here, so that it's
We need to own it and control it.
Yeah. I mean, unregulated stuff. There's some stuff that reducing regulation helps, but there's other stuff that reducing regulations hurts the business, because eventually you get sued and you go out of business because you killed people. And time and time again, you've seen cases of this. So I mean, you need a certain amount of legislation and regulation to ensure that the business is successful and the people are not harmed. And the combination of those two, well, it doesn't do you any good to kill your customers, right? I mean, it just doesn't.
Depends on the business model, but that doesn't make a lot of sense.
It's not a good business model, us outsourcing things like medication and things like that. It's not. It's a terrible business model. And I mean, we've got the people, we've got the education system, we've got the money, and we have to stop deferring it to reactive politics,
right,
instead of proactive business growth. I mean, that's how everybody gets happy. How do we stop the anger and everything that's going on? Well, people's underlying problems right now is finance. Everybody's paying a ton of money for gas, a ton of money for goods, a ton of money for everything. And how do you combat that? Well, no one's got a plan. And except,
you generate more revenue for your own household, generate more money for your own household, so you can continue to function.
That's right. That's
foster growth. That's what this chamber's for.
And to save the housing market, you got to bring in more people. We need to bring in people that have money, and to bring in people with money, they want a good education system. So, it seems pretty obvious. You only need half of that surplus to go towards education to get us into the, around the 50% percentile. And that should be good enough to bring in, enough new business and enough new people that then we can start using that extra tax base to increase it further. And eventually we could have one of the best educations in the systems in the country.
Right. Yeah, the strong tax base is critical. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Well, Thomas Duggar, Senate candidate for LD3, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us today. I think our business owners are now going to be much better educated in being able to make a decision and on what to do here in November. I appreciate your time today and your insights. And best of luck with your campaign. I look forward to working with you in this next session if you win the seat.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.